Katerina Seibert, and today I'm presenting to you about publishing data for Chapter 2 of my master's thesis. And my Chapter 2 is titled The Streaming War, an in-depth analysis of music revenue and consumption data. And essentially, my Chapter 2 is a data chapter containing all of this music revenue and consumption data. And Section 2.1 is the Streaming War introduction in this chapter. And I included 4 data tables in this chapter with an in-depth analysis of each. The first data table is music consumption data, streaming statistics, physical music sales, and digital music sales data. Data table 2 is including company revenue, comparing Apple Music and Spotify's annual revenue, number of subscribers, and year-to-year growth projections. Table 3 is including artist revenue, which is broken down by a pay-per-stream data chart. And data table 4 is containing radio consumption trends. So just to ask you all a question, and if you can write the answer down on a piece of paper, and we'll reflect back to your prediction at the end of the presentation. How many hours and minutes per day do you predict that the average adult 18-plus listener listens to the radio? And just jot that down real quick, whether you think it's 5 minutes or 5 hours. Just write down your prediction. And this radio consumption data does include satellite radio, such as SiriusXM, and internet radio as well, such as TuneIn.com. And data table 1 is going to be the Year in Metrics music consumption data. And I collected this data from Nielsen, MRC, and Billboard as well. So moving on to the analysis of this table. So that's going to be titled Section 2.2, which is an analysis of data table 1. And this data table is titled the Year in Metrics music consumption data. And to begin, data table 1 includes in column 1 the U.S. total digital audio consumption, which is also referred to in these reports as the total album equivalent consumption audio. And the equation to get the total digital audio consumption is digital albums plus TEA plus the on-demand audio SEA. And the TEA is track equivalent albums with 10 digital tracks equal to 1 album, and the SEA stands for stream equivalent albums with 1,250 premium streams equal to 1 album, and 3,750 ad-supported streams equivalent to 1 album. And overall, there's been a steady increase of 141% from 2013 to 2020. So we've had a steady increase from year to year in our U.S. total digital audio consumption, which just shows how streaming is booming in our current media climate. And in terms of on-demand song streams, there were 872.6 billion in 2020, which is a 1,681% growth from 2013. This is crazy. And the fact that this number is in the billions and has increased over 1,000% growth since 2013 is amazing. And moving on to the U.S. total album sales, there were 102.4 million in 2020, with a 68% decrease from 2012. And for the total album sales, I added up the digital sales and the physical sales to get this total. And when we break it down, the digital album sales also decreased with 34.4 million digital album sales in 2020, which is a 71% decrease from 2012. And physical album sales also decreased, and they had 68 million physical album sales in 2020, which is a 66% decrease from 2012. And the only aspect of album sales that have grown and not decreased are U.S. vinyl LP sales, which just demonstrates this vinyl revival that we're currently experiencing in our current media climate. And in 2020, there were 27.5 million vinyl LP sales, which is an 83% growth since 2012. And to come back from a medium that was almost completely dead And to have an 83% growth is substantial. And moving on to the US digital song sales, there were 233.8 million in 2020, which is an 83% decrease from 2012. And digital song sales are going to be song sales in the old iTunes music library, which is no longer in existence, as well as services such as Bandcamp, where artists are able to set their own payment and then consumers can choose to pay for it or not. And the global on-demand audio song streams, and it's really cool that we do have some global data since MRC data took over the Nielsen music charts. They started reporting this global data, which is really important because music streaming is a global phenomenon, not a United States phenomenon. So it's cool that we do have some sort of global data from 2019 and 2020. And there's going to be 2.2 trillion in 2020 alone for on-demand audio song streams globally, which is a 18% growth from 2019. And for global digital song sales in the iTunes Music Library or on Bandcamp and such, there were 419.4 million in 2020, which is significantly less than the streaming numbers in the trillions. And this global digital song sales was a 19% decrease from 2019. And the cultural significance of all of this data, because I know it's a bit of a mouthful, is basically artist pay. And Taylor Swift removed all of her music from Spotify in 2014 to protest the ad-supported Spotify free platform. And this was dubbed Swiftgate by the media. And she eventually did end up putting it back on in about 2018 or so. But there was a big scandal with Taylor Swift and Spotify, a lot of disagreements about their free platform. And as you can see up here, revisiting our US total digital audio consumption data, the SEA stream equivalent albums show here that premium streams are worth more and are going to pay more towards artists than our ad-supported streams. And you can see that based on the fact that 1,250 premium streams is equivalent to one album, whereas for ad-supported streams, it takes 3,750 ad-supported streams to equal one album. And artists just aren't getting paid from very much from people who are listening to music on Spotify free in comparison to Spotify Premium and Apple Music. And one of our leading research questions of this data is how can we adjust our streaming service revenue models to generate more revenue for artists and compensate them for their art? And at the end of this presentation, in the conclusion, I will give you my suggestions. And our data table 2 is going to cover Apple Music and Spotify global annual revenue and consumer statistics, along with projections for 2021 to 2025. And overall, in 2020, the annual revenue for Apple Music was $4.1 billion, whereas Spotify's was higher at $9.5 billion. However, when we take a look at our revenue forecasting back at our table, which is this data here in red, we can see that Apple Music's 4-year average annual increase is 52.66%, whereas Spotify's 4-year average increase is only 28.04%. which is significantly less. And these projections show that Apple Music has the potential to surpass Spotify in annual revenue in the year 2025. And in terms of our subscriber statistics, in 2020, Apple Music had 72 million paying subscribers, and Spotify had 155 million paying subscribers, as well as 190 million non-paying subscribers. And part of the reason Spotify has so many more is because of their developmental lead. They were founded much earlier than Apple Music was. Apple Music wasn't founded until 2015. And in terms of year-to-year growth projections for subscriber statistics, I did not calculate them because the 4-year average annual increase, it was just inconsistent. And as we revisit this table, you can see here in the year-to-year change columns for Apple and Spotify premium subscribers, there is a very inconsistent growth pattern. And there is, in fact, not really a pattern at all, other than the fact that it is growing. And this ranged from 25% growth to 82% growth, which is why I did not calculate revenue forecasting for subscribers. Subscriber forecasting. So the cultural significance of Data Table 2 is that it provides insight on which streaming giant will win the streaming war. And in terms of revenue, it looks like Apple Music in the next 5 years is going to take over. Whereas in terms of number of subscribers, currently Spotify's in a major lead, and we really don't know what's going to happen in the future with the number of subscribers due to the inconsistent growth patterns. And Data Table 3 is Apple Music and Spotify, artist revenue, and other statistics. And as we mentioned before, we see these launch dates here in the right-hand column, with Spotify launching in October of 2008 in Europe. They're a Swedish-founded company, and in July of 2011 in the United States, whereas Apple Music didn't come into existence until June 30th of 2015. They were later to the streaming game. And overall, the total tracks in library, both platforms are equal at 70 million and counting. And Apple Music has a new artist-centric penny per stream model, which was previously much lower at 0.00563 cents per stream. So it's a huge improvement. And this was a new statistic as of March of 2021. And Spotify's freemium model is paying artists an average of 0.00318 cents per stream. And overall, that means that Apple Music is paying about 68% on average more per stream compared to Spotify, which is significant from an artist perspective. And the cultural significance of this artist data, revenue data, is the Global Justice at Spotify protest that occurred recently on March 15th of 2021, which was orchestrated by the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers, UMAW. And this happened in over 15 cities worldwide. It was a global protest, and people collected on the doorsteps of Spotify headquarters and offices and delivered a list of demands for Spotify to hopefully recognize and meet. And some of these cities included Birmingham, Boston, Chicago, LA, Nashville, New York, San Fran, Berlin, Madrid, London, Melbourne, Paris, Sao Paulo, Toronto, and several more as well. And here's just a picture of some of the people that were at this Justice at Spotify protest. And as you can see from their signs here, here's their list of demands. The first demand is to be paid at least 1 cent per stream and match Apple Music's user-centric payment model. The second request is for transparency. The third is to reveal all existing payola and end it. And fourth, to credit all labor in recordings, including featuring artists, which are oftentimes not recognized. And the last request is for them to stop fighting artists and stop filing lawsuits against them. And there has been a history of Spotify doing this and actually suing artists for various reasons in relation to royalties and other topics. So, moving on, Section 2.5 of Chapter 2 is going to be an analysis of Data Table 4, which is going to contain U.S. radio consumption data for adult users 18 and up. And this data was sourced from the Nielsen Company, which is a little bit separate from Nielsen Music. And these reports were titled Audio Today, How America Listens Audience Reports. And let's reflect back on our guessing game from the beginning of the presentation. And at the beginning of the presentation, I asked you to write down your guess for the average time spent listening to radio per day in 2020. And we're going to reflect on your answers here now. And the answer is 1 hour and 31 minutes, which is 10 minutes less than in 2019. And were you surprised by your results, or were you pretty spot on? And if you have any of your guessing game predictions as well as post thoughts about that, you can leave them in the comments below at the end of this YouTube video. And the other major thing that we learned from Data Table 4 was just that radio is the #1 competitor to streaming. And radio is not a dying field. It's simply changing with the emergence of satellite radio, such as SiriusXM, and internet radio, such as TuneIn.com, which has over 100,000 radio stations from around the globe. And the cultural significance of the radio medium is that it's reaching 88% of the adult US population weekly in 2020 alone, which is statistics from a year in a pandemic. And given that radio is consumed, generally speaking, during people's commutes to and from work, it's pretty remarkable that there are still 88% of adults in the US population reached weekly by radio. And in previous years, it was around 92 or 93%, as we can see from our data table. And radio does remain relevant despite the prevalence of digital music streaming services such as Spotify and Apple Music. Yes, and here is our radio consumption data. And as you can see here with COVID-19, we had a 88% weekly reach. In previous years, we had a 93 to 92%. So I would be curious to see what these statistics are in 2021 and post-COVID pandemic. And actually, some of these, in terms of monthly listeners, were actually increasing over time. So that's pretty telling as well, the stability of the radio industry. And the streaming war, in conclusion, we have a Venn diagram here to do a little bit of a comparison from Apple Music to Spotify. And overall, basically, Spotify has an earlier launch date, which gives them a huge leg up in terms of number of subscribers at the end of the day, since they were launched so many years earlier than Apple was. And in terms of payment, Apple Music is definitely superior in terms of artists from an artist perspective. They have an artist-centric payment model paying a penny per stream, whereas Spotify has a freemium payment model of 0.00318 per stream. And currently, Spotify is in the lead in terms of 2020 annual revenue with $9.5 billion in revenue. And at less than half of that, Apple Music had a 2020 annual revenue of $4.1 billion. However, when we take a look at our annual growth patterns, Apple Music is increasing at a much greater rate at 52.66% in comparison to Spotify's 28.04%. So in 2025, I foresee that Apple Music will surpass Spotify in terms of annual revenue. But maybe if Spotify eliminated their Spotify free, then they would have more paying users. But that is a prediction. And in summary, radio remains relevant, and vinyl is experiencing a revival, which can be attributed to consumers' desire for a tactical connection to their music in a digital world. Third, how can we adjust our streaming service revenue models to generate more revenue for artists and compensate them for their art? And when we take a look at this leading question of this data, I have a few solutions. The first is to adopt an artist-centric penny per stream minimum, including featuring artists from Spotify's perspective, to match Apple Music's would be appreciated from an artist perspective. And second of all, it would be beneficial to artists to eliminate the Spotify free platform, because it is not beneficial in terms of revenue, and it's not beneficial for the company or the artist. They don't make much money from their ad subscription service, so why have it? And I get that it does encourage people to join the platform, and the hope is that these free users will eventually switch over to the premium platform. However, if they did eliminate it, then they would be forced to switch to either Apple Music or Spotify Premium, or maybe another form of music consumption. And my final solution is to change the amount that users have to pay in subscription fees per month. I think it would be fair to increase the monthly user fees from $9.99 a month on Spotify and Apple to $14.99 a month. This would significantly increase the amount that they would have for artist revenue. And in addition, the student fee is currently $4.99 a month, and I think it would be fair to increase this to $9.99 a month. And if you have any final questions or predictions or any other comments, then you can leave them in the YouTube comments below.